Yo, what's going on, guys? This week on Bottom of the Bill, we have Oz Noy. Oz is an amazing guitar player from Israel originally, and now he is living in New York doing his thing. He's recorded with, I mean, literally every artist under the sun. It's kind of wild how many pop records he's played on. Before we get to that, make sure you subscribe to the page. Anything you can do to help us grow this thing is greatly appreciated. We also have a merch store. The link is below. All great merchandise. It's out right now for Bottom of the Bill stuff. Check it out. And without further ado, here's Oz Noy.
This is Bottom of the Bill.
Yeah, man, Oz, I really appreciate you being here, man. Thank you for taking the time.
Sure. My pleasure.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of get into some of your background and stuff. I've been a fan for a long time, and I was reading through your bio and everything before we were doing this. And you're from Israel originally, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And when did you come to the States?
And in the summer of '96.
Okay. And were you kind of playing already? Obviously, you were playing already. What was kind of your experience in Israel, and what made you want to come here?
Well, I was already a professional guitar player in Israel since I'm a really young age. I started to play professionally when I was 15. So when I moved to New York, I already done a lot of TV shows and some records and a lot of gigs there, like with some pop acts and a lot of jazz gigs. So when I moved to New York, I was kind of a professional player. I could, play a gig, or go in a studio and record or play a jazz gig. I wasn't as good as the guys here, but I could hang, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wanted to come because, first of all, the jazz scene in New York is just the best there is. And a bunch of my friends that were living in Israel moved there a couple of years before, and they started to get pretty successful here. Like they did a lot of jazz gigs, and they were working here. So I just wanted to come because I like the music scene in New York.
Gotcha.
So that was. It took me a minute because all my friends, there was about 4 or 5 people that all moved at the same time. They were 20 when they moved here. And it took me like 4 years to I was 24 when I moved to New York,
Okay. Do you feel like you were kind of behind the ball a little bit, or do you feel like you were able to catch up pretty quickly?
I was able to catch up. These days, being here for so long, I don't think it matters when you come. But at the time, they were already ahead of me because they were here for 4 years. Time does something because you meet people, they already start to have actual careers and record and do all this stuff, play with famous people, jazz guys and stuff. So it took me a minute, but it takes everybody the time that it takes them. Some people can come here and get a gig right away. Some people can stay here for 10 years and develop or whatever till they get their shit together, And I don't think there's rules to it. I don't think it's good or bad either way, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, it is about music, but it's also about what lifestyle you want to have.
Right. Yeah.
And the New York music is very specific. So it's at the end of the day, is okay, do you want to live like that? Do you want to have that kind of life,
Yeah, totally. I actually am very curious about that because there is this kind of stigma, I guess, with being a musician and, the party lifestyle, the late nights and all that stuff. But then there seems to be this kind of resurgence in, I guess, like maintaining a level of professionalism, I think, where now I'm noticing a lot of artists that are operating at a certain capacity or that, are at a certain level of skill and ability seem to be living more like holistic lifestyles almost. Do you find that that's been the case with a lot of artists that are kind of operating at the level that you're operating at now?
I never was surrounded by heavy partying or like, like that kind of stuff. So all the people that I always played with or I always been around were pretty down to earth people that just really had their shit together. You know what I mean? So And those are the guys that work here the most, really. I don't know many people here that are, party and kind of mess up and still work. If you mess up here, you're not going to work,
Right.
At least that was my opinion. Maybe in some other scenes, it's different, but from what the stuff that I do, if you fuck up, you're out.
Yeah.
And nobody can afford to do that anymore. You know what I mean? Maybe in the 80s, everybody was partying, it was fine. But today, I don't think anybody can afford to mess up, really. It's like there's too many people, there's too many great players, there's too much, you can't. It's like just so since I moved here, I don't really, I know people that were a little loose, you know what I mean? Or people that go partying but it was never really around me. Most of the people that were around me were pretty solid, and that's why they work so much, because they're really solid, musically and personally, And
Yeah.
that's a big thing. It's the personal thing is a huge. People don't understand that more than 50% of the reason why you work as a musician is not because how you play, it's because how you are as a person.
Totally, man. That's so true.
I'm saying especially if you do tours, because
Oh,
people want to be around somebody that's cool that I can.
yeah, you got to be able to hang with somebody on a bus or whatever for, like unlimited time. You got to rehearse with them. You got to play shows with them. It's endless. So yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I have a funny story about New York, actually. I was there back in February, and I was just going to scope the scene out and see what was happening. I'm not much of a jazz player myself, but I do appreciate the music immensely, and I do study it. But so I found a lot of jazz jams around town, and there was one that I stumbled upon. I won't say names because I feel like it might get a little with you being on and having that those people around. You might know some of them, and I don't want to put anybody out there. But it was funny because I walked in and there was a guitar player, an older gentleman, and we were listening, and I could tell he was kind of struggling on this gig, and the rest of the people playing with him were all younger, either fresh out of college or maybe a little bit more seasoned, but not quite at where he was at, obviously. And so after the gig, he hadn't, it was clear that he had underperformed. And I remember walking outside, him and the bass player were having a conversation. He got like fired immediately off the gig. And I was like, holy shit, man. And they almost got into like a fist fight about it, actually. It was kind of wild. But it was interesting because I felt, I do have a bit, I'm conflicted in one way because there's an element of allowing people to come and work things out on a jam where you don't want to be too, you don't want to hold such a crazy standard where you decentivize people from coming and trying to work things out for themselves. But then there's also that level of wanting to maintain a standard of at least the house band where you should be performing at this level to encourage people that want to be at that level. But it was interesting to me, like just like how quick he was able to. I've never seen that happen. I've worked in Miami, Jacksonville. I've been to all kinds of. I've just never seen anybody get fired for just not playing at the standard that everybody else was like that before. You know what I mean? It was wild. Is that a culture that you notice a lot of in that scene?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think so. But I also haven't gone to a jazz jam in like I don't know how many years. So maybe things have changed.
Yeah, totally. I can see that. Also, congratulations on the newest single that you released, Ebb and Flow. It's a great tune, man. I really enjoyed listening to it.
Which single? What?
The latest single that you released back in March. Yeah, it was Ebb and Flow, I believe was the name of the song. With Oh no, it says you were featured on here anyways with Darren Mizrahi.
I have no idea what this is.
Oh wow.
Doron.
Oh, Doron with Doron.
Doron,
it's
yeah.
not my thing. It's his. He's my music teacher.
Oh no shit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I study ear training with him.
Oh really?
And he's an amazing musician and composer. So he released an album, and I'm featured as a guest on one song.
Okay, got you. I see it. Yeah. Well, that song was amazing. I like the trading that you guys were doing back and forth.
Yeah. And also Omer Fedi. You know who Omer Fedi is?
I'm not sure. No, that name doesn't sound familiar.
Their singer and producer in the world today.
Oh wow.
No shit.
He does, yeah, he's like the king of pop today. So he's on it also.
Oh,
He
that's
lives in
awesome.
LA.
I've noticed that a lot with the pop world. As I noticed, you have like your credits are insane as far as stuff that the people that you've worked with and the kind of stuff that you've been able to do. For somebody that kind of plays, like you exist in the jazz world, but like you obviously must have an affinity for pop music and for different styles to want to get into that creative headspace. What's that like for you? What to go from like this more avant-garde and obscure music to kind of working within the confines of the more, pop centered music.
I grew up as this kind of a studio musician. I always played pop. And the reason I play guitar is because of pop music, is because of the Beatles. So I grew up on the Beatles, really. That's why I started to play guitar. And there's nothing I like more than songs, like really good songs. Like I like jazz and stuff, but the stuff that really touches me and I really like is songs. So I'm very song oriented kind of guy. Over the years, I've done on and off. I've done, like pop and singer-songwriter stuff, and recordings and all that stuff. But I guess people know me as a solo artist because I released these solo albums, and I do, because I'm a jazz player. It's not always, some people have certain ideas about that stuff that, if you do one thing, that's what you do, blah, blah, blah. But I always did both my whole life. And I never had a problem playing the gig, meaning I never had a problem just going and playing guitar parts. I kind of know how to do it. I've done it my whole life. I have my studio chops and stuff. So I never had a problem with it. It was always like second nature to me. It's something that I've done since I'm a kid,
Right.
And I'm always into it because I like to listen to songs. I like popular music. I like singer-songwriters. I like that stuff. I follow it. So to me, there's never a problem. I think the issue is sometimes from the other side where somebody go like, oh, this jazz guy that has got all these chops. You know what I mean? But it is what it is. People that know what I do, they call me to do to do those gigs, There's not a lot of that coming out of New York, but sometimes I get to do certain gigs where I'm in a house band and playing for like some big artists and stuff. So it's just that kind of a thing. And my focus artistically is just my music and just because I'm lucky that I can do it,
Yeah.
A lot of people do that stuff and they just can't. They just don't have the, so I'm lucky I have a place in New York I can play every week. Not every week, but there's a couple of places I play in New York, but the main place is the Bitter End where I played for like, I don't know how many years, like 20 years or something. So I can always play there and develop my music, and I can do different shows with different people. So I have an outlet to do my stuff, I don't know if I would live somewhere else, and I wouldn't have that if I would be able to do it.
All right, guys, this episode's brought to you by Best Buds CBD Store. If you're like me, maybe THC isn't always the right high for you, or maybe the legal status of THC has you a bit hesitant to indulge. So at Best Buds CBD Store, they have an array of CBD and Delta 8 THC products. These guys truly care about their service, so everything is meticulously sourced and prepared to deliver a top-notch product and experience. If you head to their website, you'll find all kinds of educational information regarding Delta THC and CBD. Not to mention, if you use promo code BotBPod, that's BOTB pod, you'll save 10% on your order. This is not a one-time deal. If you use promo code BotBPod, every time you place an order with Best Buds, it will give you 10% off. That's in perpetuity, forever. So head over to bestbudscbdstore.com and start saving on all of your CBD and Delta 8 products. Enjoy, guys.
I love that you described it this way, that there are guys out there that can play and play the part whatever they want, but they don't have the fortitude or wherewithal, maybe is the right word, to take on the role of like an artist per se, which is something that you do. And I'm curious as to what being an artist versus a musician means to you and how you've been able to cultivate that using your different experiences as a side guy over the years.
You know, when I moved to New York, I never wanted to think of. I never thought about being a solo artist. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna move to New York and be a superstar. You know, it was never that. I just wanted to move to New York and just play with really good players and play really good music. It was never. I never thought about becoming a solo artist. But the funny thing was, before I moved to New York, when I was in Israel, I started to do this little trio because there was a period of time that I wasn't getting called to do jazz gigs. Like I always did pop gigs in Israel. I did like, famous singer-songwriters and TV stuff. But the jazz thing there was up and down, and I like to do it. So I formed a trio in Israel, and I started to play some places, and it was pretty good for like about the year or two before I moved to New York. I played a lot. And it was good, you develop stuff for your chops and stuff. So when I moved to New York, I basically kind of formed that same kind of trio because I wanted people to kind of notice my playing, you know what I mean? So I formed a trio here, and I started to play that club, the Bitter End. And I don't know, now I think about it kind of foolishly enough. I thought that if I'll do it, people will notice me and start calling me to work, to play. So people did notice me, but I didn't know was when people notice you as a band leader, they don't actually call you to play because they see you do your thing, you know?
So true, man.
So at the time, I kind of didn't know that that's what it was, you know? So I just kept doing it because I had a good time and I had a gig or two that I can do it, and I can write music and I can call all these like great players that I always wanted to play with, you know? So for me, it was an outlet to really meet musicians. So, but through the whole time, I wasn't thinking about being a solo artist. It wasn't a part of my thing, you know. So what happened eventually was I was playing the Bitter End, and a friend of mine, they used to record. There was two mics, and there's still two mics in the room that they record really nice. So I did this little demo of a bunch of tunes, and a bunch of friends of mine heard it and says like, hey man, you should make an album from this because it's got a vibe, which it really did actually, you know? So I just did a live album because I just thought, I still didn't think about anything like I'm a solo artist. I just thought it would be a cool thing to do, you know what I mean? So I did it, and that's kind of how my whole solo thing started. But to answer your specific question, in order to be an artist, first of all, you normally need to write music, and I always wrote, you know. And usually when you write music, you need to write it for a certain situation. So I had a trio and a certain concept in mind, and I had a gig where I can do it all the time. So that's how it kind of developed. In terms of being a solo artist, you have to have your shit together.
Right.
You know? Because if you don't, things are not gonna, happen. And I tell this to everybody because I've been doing it for a really long time. You have to be willing to lose money sometimes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't. It sounds kind of a little cliche and stuff, but I have many friends of mine that released albums and are great players, and they're just not willing to take. It's not really taking risks. It's kind of like almost, you make money, but sometimes you have to, put money into it, and you just have to spend time and money on this sometimes. There's just no way around it.
It's an investment into your business, however you want to look at it. Yeah.
And a lot of people are just not into that, period. It comes down to just that at the end.
It sounds almost counterintuitive to me as a musician, because I feel like a lot of us didn't get into this because we wanted to play, cover bands and stuff like that, which is, a huge thing that musicians often just kind of succumb to. They do the cover band thing, the corporate, the wedding thing or whatever, then they end up never really creating because, again, like you're saying, they're not willing to take the hit on the money side or whatever it may be. And it seems like that's what you'd want to do as an artist or as a musician, because for a lot of people, you got into playing an instrument because you wanted to create in some capacity, So to kind of relinquish that instinct to the dollar almost seems a little counterintuitive to me as an artist.
I would like to say something about that. First of all, not everybody needs to be a solo artist. Not everybody needs to write music.
Of course.
Like you can be a really good player that just sideman gigs. And I personally don't see any problem with playing covers. You know what I mean? Like if it's good, it's good, So you don't have to, it's only if you want to do that, it's only if you have this desire and something to say as a solo artist, you know what I mean? Like you don't, there's like hundreds and thousands of musicians that are really great that just do other stuff. It's fine, you know what I mean? Not
Right.
it's for everybody.
No, totally.
Um, and I never saw music like you know who Steve Ferrone is, the drummer?
I don't think so.
He's a famous drummer. He's Tom Petty's Heartbreaker drummer, but
Gotcha.
he's a very famous studio guy. He played on gazillion records. So he told me, he's a good friend of mine. He told me once, well, thank God I'm not working for a living. You know? So it's kind of like that. When you play music, you don't feel like to me, it's not work. You know what I mean? Like there's certain things that feel like work, but I never thought about music as a job. You know what I mean? That's my point of saying that.
Right.
So some people do think about it as a job, and then it's still fine. You still make a living. You're still playing an instrument, but it may not be as thrilling as as just playing artistic music, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I think that's another important thing for people to keep in mind is that we had do you know Kevin Scott?
Yeah, of course.
Basically.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he made some really good points about even being a side guy, and like, doing a gig for the love of the music or because you have some kind of creative input in it. Those two things can be true separately, but to never think about money as the thing, at least at first, like for a while, because even as a side man, even if you don't want to be an artist, I do believe even as a side man, you might have to lose some money at first to take advantage of an opportunity that could help elevate you to a different place. So that's kind of the point that Kevin was making too, and it kind of just it echoes what you're saying right now about not looking at music as a job, and when you take that.
No.
I'm sorry.
At the end of the day, it's supposed to be all about the music.
Exactly.
And look, everybody's doing shitty gigs sometimes. I do shitty gigs sometimes too. You know what I mean? There's no way around it. You just do. But, so in those situations, you do think about the money, but still, you're playing guitar. You know what I mean? You're not shoveling or whatever, or working in a bank or whatever. You're playing music. So it's fine. It's just a matter of, if you only do that all the time, that is probably gonna draw your soul. But if there's a mix, and you make a living and you do everything else, then it's fine, But as long as it's all about the music, it's okay.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, man. What are some of the? This is kind of like one of those cliche questions, but I always enjoy the conversation. Do you have like any moments that pop out to you about like some of the shittier gigs that you've played, whether it be patrons or band leaders or side guys, just things weren't working out properly?
I try to not think about those.
Yeah, I feel that.
There's some gigs, I don't do them much anymore. I try to avoid I guess, thinking about the bad gigs. Like sometimes if I do something bad, I just kind of erase it from my memory. I was like, all right, that was that, and that's it.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't want anything. I've done some stuff that was not happening. Plenty of stuff that was a drag, but you just go. You wake up the next morning. I was like, okay, that was that, and then move on.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
That will have no impact on my life the next day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Do you sing at all, or do you just play guitar?
Only play.
Okay, cool. Because we were listening to which record, Chris?
It was Ozone Squeeze.
Ozone Squeeze, yeah. And you
that's Ozone Squeeze is kind of what I call my pop jam band. It's a project, it's kind of a side project that I started 5 years ago. So it's me and Darren Stanley is a drummer from Atlanta.
Okay.
And Ray Thistlethwaite he's a keyboard player that plays keyboards, left-hand bass, and sings, and also writes. So we did one album 5 years ago as a trio. We toured with it a bit, like people kind of know about it. And then we were supposed to do another album and pandemic hit, so it took us 5 years. And this year, in January, February, we released another album, and we added a girl singer, Sarah Nemitz. So now it's a quartet, and we released a new album called Squeeze It. It was released in maybe February or March of 2023.
Okay.
And we did a little bit of touring in the U.S., and that's pretty much it. We're just trying to see when the next time we can tour again.
Yeah. Now, when you're so this is one of those projects that would you consider it like a passion project, something that you've wanted to do that you just didn't really have time earlier on?
Well, a bunch of years ago, me and my manager were talking about stuff, and he says, like, man, you got to do something that's more like jam bandy or more like song oriented. And I was like, sure, because I'm into that stuff. I never made a band like that, but I'm into it. As I said, I played on songs. Like, I love songs. That's what I kind of, So I started to think about it, and I found these two guys, and Ray writes really great stuff. So the first album has a bunch of covers and some of Ray tunes, and the band has a real sound, And the thing about this band also is there's guitar solos and stuff. It's really, you can stretch, So it's really like a pop jam band. The songs are like more pop oriented. They're like really good written songs, but then there's sections that you can kind of jam.
Yeah.
So that was that, and then the new album is even more of that,
Okay, and with would you say a similar ratio to covers versus originals, or are you guys writing more in this next one?
In this new album, there's more originals, because Sarah, the girl singer, she writes great too, so it was more originals.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And
even we do kind of our versions of it,
Right. As far as like releasing the music and all that, and then like are you trying to kind of build tours around the releases and everything like that, or are you just kind of releasing the music and just seeing what happens with it?
No, the way it works for me, it works for everybody's differently. I release an album and then I tour behind the album.
Right.
That's kind of the way I do it. I've been doing it for a while. So, for example, the Ozone Squeeze record was released in March. We had a tour in March. And now it's a little problematic because the keyboard player, Ray, he's very busy. So we're just waiting to get another opportunity to tour again. But I'm just finishing now a live album that I did with my band with Dennis Chambers and Jimmy Haslip.
Fuck yeah.
So that record is going to come out in September, October, we're going to tour.
Okay.
So that's kind of how it works. I don't always have to release an album to tour, but when you have something new, it always helps because it's more of a thing, Plus, you can push. Plus, you can, sell it at the gigs and stuff like that. So it always helps when that's the case,
Because like there's also like there's whatever you come up to get a little bit inside baseball here. We come up with the marketing assets, and then you have like people want to talk about it more. It's something new and fresh, so it helps in the PR. The marketing side. Do you have people helping you with that, or are you kind of just doing it all yourself right now?
I don't do anything myself. I'm on Abstract Logic. It's a record label,
right? And
they also so they basically book me. They release the albums. They kind of do everything.
Wow.
I have somebody that does my social media for me because that's a whole lot of game. But everything else is pretty much Abstract Logic. I'm
curious as to how touring has been since COVID and all that. I know that bands at a very at the local and regional level, like mine was, experienced extremely difficult terrain to start touring again after COVID. I mean, if ticket sales were hard before, they were real hard afterwards. So how have you, to release a record earlier this year and then one later this year, and then ideally tour on both of those things? That's not an easy thing to pull off, especially when you're talking about ticket sales. So I'm curious as to what that landscape has looked like and how you've been able to make it work.
First of all, nothing is what it was. It's not the same, you know? So in terms of ticket sales, I don't know about that. Things are different in general. That's even not had to do with anything to do with tours. People are just get used to sitting in front of their computers now, so it's harder to get people out. That's just what it is, and that's been the case for a while. The problem with touring is that the cost of traveling is really high now.
Exactly.
Flying and hotels and all that stuff, it's so expensive now that I had to cancel some shows because here and in Europe, by the way, because I was not able to get. I would lose money by getting somewhere. You know what I mean? Because the travel was so badly expensive. So I think that's the main problem that everybody's dealing with now is the cost of travel, and that affects touring. You know, that affects it a lot. In terms of crowds, I don't know. I started touring again a year and a half ago, and when I started touring, we were still wearing masks on the plane and stuff, and even you know what I mean. So it was right when it was possible to do. In terms of the people showing up, people did show up, but it was kind of like some places were better than others, so it was still kind of a little like this. I think the main issue right now that everybody's struggling with more than anything is just the cost of moving around.
Right. Because and so you guys aren't like traveling by bus or by van or anything. You guys are just doing flying dates only.
A lot of flying dates, sometimes vans, but even that, it's like everything is just more expensive now.
Yeah.
Hotels are more expensive, like everything is. So it's just really hard to kind of move from one place to the next. And even if you raise the ticket prices, it's not balanced out quite. It's still kind of wacky.
Yeah.
When you're an artist, like I think I'm releasing an album, I have to do this. I have to go and tour. Some people would not want to do it because I don't want to take the chance of not making money or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's a thing that you kind of have to be. It's almost like something that. It's like a hobby. It's like a bad hobby that you have.
It's a bad hobby, yeah. Especially if it's your only source of income. You're just like, your hobby is like draining.
Oh, that's the only source of income.
Yeah.
It's like a bad.
Yeah. That's kind of like what I'm curious about is because like there's this part of you that's like, and most artists are like, yeah, we don't want to lose money, but we have to do the thing. And hopefully you make up for it because with the travel expenses being high, you have to, make up for that on ticket sales or whatever else the money's coming from, and people aren't showing up the way that they were before. So that's going to hit ticket sales as well. So then you have merchandise, and hopefully by touring and getting the word out, people are going to your website and streaming your music, and you're making it up in some other kind of way, right? Is that kind of what the hope is?
Yeah, well, to be clear, I don't go out on tour and try to lose money. But if you go out, basically when you go out on tour, you're supposed to make money. You know what I mean?
Of course.
But situations and I've been in those situations before the pandemic too. It's like there are situations sometimes where the numbers don't add up because maybe there weren't enough people at the shows, or maybe. I don't know, the hotels were too expensive. It's always like things that just kind of sometimes don't add up, and you just have to eat it. And, then you do one thing, and after that, you do another thing that pays really well, and it all adds up to something,
Yeah.
So it's just look more like the global picture of what it is,
Right.
And people say, fuck it, and just don't do it. Some people do. No, really, it's like you don't have to do this, you know what I mean?
Right. I've thought about that so many times with a van broken on the side of the road or something. You're just like, I don't have to do this to myself. Like, what am I doing here right now?
Well, you do it because you love it, and you like the music, and you have a good time, and it's cool.
Yeah, totally. It's a great experience overall. I mean, it's really hard to think about another lifestyle when you're traveling and you're meeting people, seeing all these great places and playing your music and seeing how it's affecting people. So it really makes up for if you do get a loss on it, if you do take a loss on it, just the experience alone, I think, helps in the creative process. It helps the mind, certainly, with just whatever. I think it's like therapeutic almost to be out in the road and doing this kind of work. And then, so I don't know, it makes up for it in different ways, I feel like. If you do take a loss, that's like the silver lining in my eyes.
I don't know. To me, it's, again, most of the tour I've done in my life, I did not lose money, but there are a situation where you just do because it's what it is. But to me, it's really not about that. It's like, because I'm releasing solo albums, if I decide one day that I'm done, then I'm not going to do it. But as long as I do that, it's kind of, I feel like it's something that I just have to do, so I just do it,
Right.
And the musical part is always great because it's always great bands and we play good music and it gets better and better. So that part is always cool. It's just the other parts don't always line up the same way as you wanted to, but
Yeah, of course. Yeah, for sure. And I'm curious about the creative process as well, because I mean, obviously all the numbers stuff and like that's all nerdy stuff that I'm into just because I understand how it works to an extent. But the creative process is also something that I think is interesting because it works differently for different artists and different musicians. I'm curious as to what it's like for you working with the different bands that you put together and then having the music in your head, bringing it to life, recording, and then everything that follows. Can you kind of walk me through what that process is like for you?
Well, yes, but it's a little different. The process is a little different. The way I do it is I usually have a concept for a record, let's say, or for a band, For example, some of my old albums, I released those albums called Twisted Blues. It was Twisted Blues Volume 1 and Volume 2.
Yep.
So the concept was taking all these blues forms and writing kind of more advanced harmony on them. So I made those two albums. Then I did like the last two solo albums that I did were more boogaloo kind of oriented. So the first thing is I kind of get the concept in my head. Then when I start writing the music or collecting the music for it, I have work to play in New York. So I would play in the clubs here with whatever band I wish to play with, like whoever the guys that I play with here, And I'm trying to kind of get the music together. Once the music together, then I will go in the studio and record the album. And when the album is recorded, the music is already really together, So then I record the album, and then once the album gets released, we go out on tour with whoever I tour with. So that's like the process, In terms of creativity, it's great because, it takes me time. I write the stuff, I play it live, I kind of mess around with it, then we go and record it. I try to get the best performance on the record. And then when you go out and play it on tour, you already know what's going on. So it's really all about developing from the studio version to the next level. So artistically and like from that end, it's great because it's almost like you're taken to the next level from the album,
Right. And
but it's a process. It takes a while. This process can take a year or two sometimes,
Totally. That's what I'm interested in because you're working, you're coming up with concepts and then you're bringing it, then you're kind of building your band around this concept that you have in mind, and then you're working it out at your residency gig that you have. What is working it out look like? Are you recording the live sessions and going back and listening and then kind of dissecting them? Are you like telling people, hey, I like what you did here, but not so much here, let's not do that next time, kind of thing?
So the way it works is I usually, when I write, I make a demo at home. I have a studio here, so I make a demo and have really not good demo. Like I program really basic. No, seriously. Yeah. I program very basic drum beat, but it's the drum beat that needs to be there. It's like the vibe. I usually come up with the bass lines. And then I do guitar. Maybe I put the little pad if I need to. And then I record a very basic demo. We usually do a little rehearsal to just go over the music. And then after that, we just play it. And what happened when you play it, when you bring a bass part to Will Lee or a drum part to, I don't know, to Keith Carlock or Anton Fig or whoever there is around here that I play with, they make it their own. So then the music kind of comes to life. And then you can kind of see what works and what not. Because When I do a demo at home, I can never tell if it works.
Of course, yeah.
But when you start playing live, so what happened is then you start playing live, and then sometimes I'll tweak the chart a little bit, and then we'll do a little rehearsal again or whatever. But a lot of the stuff, when I say a little rehearsal, I'm talking about 20 minutes learning the tune. That's it. Everything else happens at the gig, you know? And that's where things happen. That's where it kind of, the identity of the tune happens. And then when we play it enough and it's got a vibe, when I go to record, a big part of the recording process for me is because I have access to pretty much anybody I want to play with, almost, you know what I mean? So I can call anybody I want, kind of, which is great. The guys that I love, at least, you know? But I don't like to use people that I never played before, never played the music. So because I like the stuff to gel and to be organic. So usually I would think of who would be it would always start with a drummer, who would be the best drummers for these tunes, you know? And then I'll just call those guys.
Right.
Sometimes I play them anyhow already, so it's like, you know, and that's how it really works.
Are you using the same musicians that you're playing live with in the studio? Is that the ideal situation for you?
I mostly do. Like on the last, I mostly do maybe there was a record or two. I use Vinny Colaiuta on a couple of things, and Vinny doesn't tour with me, but I do play with Vinny. And whenever we do stuff, I always tell him, "Hey man, we gotta play this before." So it's usually okay, you know. But all the other guys like Weckel or Dennis or you know, the old times with Anton Fig and Keith Carlock or Stephen Wolf or like Rocky Bryant or Steve Ferroni, we always played. So it wasn't like they're friends of mine, but we always played. So it wasn't like it was like jumping in the studio and doing it. I never do that ever. And the same thing with bass players, like, you know, weirdly I played with like a zillion gigs here. So, you know, and James Genius the same, and Petitucci is here too. So I've never ever went to the studio cold and go like, hey, let's play this. Never.
Right. And I'm curious also on the live end of it, when you guys are kind of coming to like your final, or you're going through the creative process of like kind of working things out, how much of what you're doing is based off of like crowd response and stuff too? Because like there's got to be times where the crowd is just like feeling what you're doing and reacting, versus times where you can feel you're kind of losing them on some stuff. Are you paying attention to that at all when you're writing? No. Okay. You're just like
it's got zero effect on what I do.
Okay.
But let me not be an asshole here. It's not that I don't care. It's just that people dig good stuff, you know what I mean? And if you play good stuff, people dig it. So if you like what you do and you think it's good, people will like it.
Right.
Not everybody. Never gonna please everybody anyhow. But I think me and also the guys in the band, you kind of have a good sense of what works and what not. You know what I mean? And the crowd is pleased when you do good stuff. Doesn't matter what it is, you know? So it doesn't really have an effect to me on the writing or on whatever. You know, it's different with songs, but when you play songs and you have lyrics, like it connects to people in a different way. Like you can really see people getting into it. With jazz, it's so abstract, you know what I mean?
Right.
So people are connected to the grooves and the sounds, and it's not something that hits them like somebody saying, I love you or something. You know what I mean? It's a different kind of connection. So it's not the same. You can't read it the same way, you know?
Right. No, that's totally true, man. I've always been curious about that, because you talk about, but you hear about like different forms of art where they do, like comedians will often work things out and see crowd reaction to see what's working and what's not. I've always been curious if musicians that kind of craft their music in a live setting pay attention to that at all as well. So it's just interesting to hear that perspective, you know. Do now, from when you're in the studio and then you're touring the music, how much does it change from what the studio production to what it is when you're touring the music?
The tunes kind of stays the same, but everybody interprets them a little different. It depends on who's doing the tour.
Right.
Like, for example, playing with Dennis Chambers sounds different than playing with Dave Weckl. You know what I mean? It just sounds different. Everybody's got a different approach. And I love it because that's inspiring to me, because I don't want the thing to be just like the record. I already did it. So the tunes are the same. The jamming aspect changes a little bit, but it's still within the form of what the song is. It's just there's a lot of freedom, especially with the improvisation side. So I think it gets better after you start touring. After the record comes out, you go like, "Oh, I wish I could go and record now," you know?
Right. Yeah, of course.
But it's just changes. You know, it's different. It doesn't change drastically, but it does change. You know?
Yeah, it's a bit of it. Just
better.
Right. Yeah, especially if you're, when you have guys at that caliber that you're surrounded with, it's like they're just kind of bringing their own flavor to it. If it's a different artist than who's on the record, it's like they come in and they just add their flair to it, and it could be better or just different,
Exactly. And also, there's certain guys that I tour with that are good guys to tour with. They're great players, but they're also good to tour with in general. So they have their own thing over the music, and I'm not attached to anything, as long as the vibe is there, like of the tune, I'm fine.
Right. Right.
I'm not that specific about, if there's a signature groove or signature bass line that needs to be there, but anything else, I kind of trust the guys I play with. Sometimes they come up with stuff and they're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's so important to be able to trust the guys that you're playing with to make creative choices, it allows you to take your hand off the wheel a little bit and really focus on what it is you want to be saying there too,
Yeah.
And have you so another thing I'm kind of curious about is I love in this style of music what happens with, like, especially guitar tones and stuff. There was like this kind of thing that started happening where there's a lot of like jazz harmony and then all this fusion stuff where you have guys like Pat Metheny and Schofield and Mike Stern. Obviously a lot of jazz influence and harmony and arrangements and stuff, but then the guitar using like these wild effects and just kind of having a whole different thing. And I noticed this a lot in your music too. Can you kind of speak to some of that creative energy and why that happens in this versus more traditional styles of jazz?
I first of all think that jazz opened up a lot since I grew up playing jazz. Like, it really opened up. It's like, to me, all jazz now is really fusion. Like, fusion is kind of a bad word, but if you really think about fusion is just a mix of styles. And there's a bad connotation for fusion because of the 80s, because everything was very technical. But fusion is also Miles Davis and Mahavishnu Orchestra and all that kind of stuff. So to me, jazz today is all fusion because they mixed, a lot of the R&B and the soul are getting mixed into that. And everything is getting mixed into jazz now. So I think that's great. I think that's really excellent. That wasn't the case when I grew up in the 80s. It was still pretty stiff. Like, again, in the 80s, like, Pat Metheny was doing, electric, the Pat Metheny group, and then Chick Corea was doing electric band. And there was stuff going on like that throughout history of jazz all the time. But I think now it's super, super open, which is fantastic to me. That, like, guitar players don't have to play a jazz box anymore. They can play with reverb and delay and loops and all that stuff. It's excellent.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. They can add anything they want. There's no real, oh, this is not jazz, this is jazz. It used to be like that in the past, but not anymore. And I think Miles was the guy that was like the king of that. He kind of, but he really always tried to push and open, to the next thing. In terms of using effects and stuff, I started using effects from the beginning because when you play a trio platform, there's a lot of space to cover.
Right.
Guitar, bass, drums. So effects and electronics and loops and all that stuff, it just makes sonically things more interesting. And I've done it forever because I could find space for that in my music. Sometimes you play music that doesn't have the space for it. So you also have to kind of write the stuff or find the tunes that you can do this stuff on, you know?
Right, right. And are you paying attention to that kind of thing when you're writing the tunes, or you're like, well, I want to use this effect. I want to be able to have delays or, chorus effects happening here. So I'm going to make sure there's space for that to exist.
Kind of like I don't really think about that when I write, but when the tunes come together, I have certain kind of little things that I do, tricks that I do with either delays or loops or the Leslie pedal, stuff like that, or tremolos that I go like, oh, this will fit here or fit there. And sometimes I try to go for other stuff, but effects does make a difference in writing. Like it's inspiring to be able to, do stuff and add, because, once you put a delay on, it changes a lot of things, Like you can write a tune just based off like putting a delay on the guitar or something.
Look at you two.
It's
It's
like
the whole model, it seems like.
Yeah, exactly. So those things have power for creativity. You just have to look. If you go into a gig and playing Stella by Starlight or a standard, and it's a swing gig, you might not have that open spots where you can do it. But if you play your own music or you play things that are a little more open, then you can definitely find ways to incorporate that stuff.
Totally. Are you working, do you practice that kind of stuff at home, or are you mostly using the gig to figure stuff out?
I don't practice that at home. With looping, I do a lot of live looping, like in real time. So with that, sometimes you have to, I wouldn't say practice it, but you have to have the certain concept of what you want to do. And you do it live, and a lot of times you do it and it sucks for a while till it comes together.
Right.
It really is what it is. But you just you kind of know what you're doing, and a lot of the times the coolest stuff happens from mistakes. Like you do the loop and it came in the wrong place, or you reversed it, or something was mistaken. Suddenly you go like, oh wow, this is cool. This happened to me with effects too. Like I remember one time I was in Japan and I hit the tremolo pedal. It just like my foot hit everything on 10.
Yeah.
So I was playing, and then I suddenly hit the tremolo, and all I heard was like, grrr, and I was like, shit. But then I went with it, and then it became like a trick that I do on a rhythm guitar when I put the tremolo on 10 and I add it into the rhythm, So sometimes this kind of stuff creates it's like happy accidents,
Yeah, totally, man. I love the way you think about all this stuff. Have you thought about getting into producing at all? Have you done much producing for other artists?
Yeah, I do. Like, I'm not like a producer. Like, I don't sell myself like that, but I produce stuff because I know how to build grooves. I know how to get sounds. I know how to do studio work. So yeah, I've done stuff for people sometimes, like some songwriter stuff.
Yeah.
I can actually produce jazz records because I do it on my own all the time. But everybody's a producer now. Everybody's got a studio. Everybody can do it. So,
right. It almost kind of waters down the I guess the workload of it, but there is certainly a skill to being able to put the right people together and help kind of structure things, and especially when you're paying attention to sounds and what kind of vibe you're trying to communicate with the music, and it seems like you've got a pretty firm grasp on that for sure.
Yeah, I can do that in my sleep, kind of thing.
Yeah, I love the confidence, dude. So good.
No. To me, that's easy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I don't have to write and I just have to put things together to make it sound good, to me, it's like a piece of cake. That's not even,
Yeah, totally, man. Well, I don't know if Chris told you, we have a segment that we do here at the end of the podcast. It's called Unpopular Opinions. And we'll each just kind of go around. It doesn't have to be music related if you don't want it to be. It can be about whatever you want. So, Chris, what you got?
Awesome. So the hybrid guitars, these like Fender Acoustasonics, these acoustic electrics that are really trying to be both.
Yeah.
They take the worst qualities of both instruments and put them together. I have not played one of those that I thought was great once.
Yeah.
Sorry. And I love Fender. I play a lot of Fender stuff, but those in general, those guitar lines are just not working for me.
I could see that. Have you played much of those, Oz?
I have one of those guitars. I like it. I think the idea is you don't want to you have to have the right expectation for this thing. Like, I think this thing will work really good either to an amp or to direct and to get like more synthetic kind of sounds. I don't think it's supposed to give you that acoustic sound, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's more to get those kind of like half processed, half electric kind of sounds and make them, you know, I think it's got potential actually. I have one, I have not used it, but I kind of noodle on it or take it around, but I haven't used it on anything. But I think it's got potential for some stuff, but it's different. You can't expect it to sound like an acoustic guitar. It's more like an electric acoustic.
Yeah.
You know,
and actually,
you got to commit to that, you know?
yeah, and that's a good point as like a studio tool, because I've always like seen it at,
Exactly.
like, and I've played it live and stuff like that. And live, it doesn't feel like an acoustic or sound like one, and it doesn't feel or play like an. But to find this middle ground for something in the studio, a studio tool would be great. Maybe they could market it as that. Call me Fender.
I really think that if you kind of think about it as more of like a direct, you know, sometimes in the 80s and stuff, there was, or sometimes you get those like acoustic guitar sounds that are direct and they put chorus on it or something. You know, it's not more like that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, like a tool for production or something rather than like.
You're not gonna get the great acoustic tone from it live playing direct. It's always gonna sound a little bit like,
well, and that's
electrified.
I guess that's my standard, is that like my acoustic rig, I've got it really dialed in with like the LR bags and like a good preamp and everything, and it's a good live acoustic tone. And then I play that thing and I'm like, I want it to be speedy and also still have the tone, and it's, you know, it's maybe I'll give it that. It's a good idea, but it's not there for live quite yet. Maybe I'll walk back to that.
I'd be curious to know if there's any kind of iconic guitar parts that have been recorded with one of those, or like if there's anything that like because I haven't done any research to know that information, but I'd be curious to know if there's like an iconic part that's been played with one that we're just like shitting on right now.
I'll check it out. I'll check it out, because they're modern too. I mean, they're not, you know.
Yeah, they're within the last like 10 years probably.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, there was in the 90s, I think, when Sting came out with Nothing Like the Sun, that album, there was that, or like Phil Collins, that whole era. Dominic Miller was playing on a lot of that stuff. And Dominic plays nylon string guitar direct.
Okay.
And that it became a sound, you know? There was those Gibson guitars that were kind of thin, you know, that. And a lot of that was kind of the sound of like the late 80s, early 90s. I think that's the era, maybe mid, you know, where the direct sound has become like a thing. And you can hear it on those records, some Phil Collins records and Sting records. It's not mic guitars. And also, I know it for a fact because it's a friend of mine, Dominic, but a lot of those Sting guitars from that era are direct.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense.
Not amps, you know, so it's the same thing with this guitar. It's like something that you can kind of create a new kind of little different texture that's not really an amp, but it's not acoustic either. I think that's why they kind of developed this thing. I don't know if anybody made a career out of it yet, but
maybe one day.
That's my opinion about it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I see an avenue for you then, so there's your next project.
I don't know what. It's nice to have it, but I don't really use it much. I haven't found anything to use it for, you know?
Yeah. Well, you got an unpopular opinion, Oz?
Unpopular opinion about the gear?
Just
or
in general. It can be literally any. We've done food. We've done like movies. It can be about whatever you want, literally.
I noticed something lately. I don't know how many Jazz New York guys are going to listen to this, but you know who Kurt Rosenwinkel is?
Yeah.
Guitar. So he's like the kind of new jazz guy forever. He's like the man, you know. And he's got a thing where he uses this thing called the POG.
Oh yeah.
The electroharmonic, and he takes what it does. It does something really brilliant. He takes with the POG, when you put it on, you can take the picking out of the note. He made like a whole signature sound out of that, which is great. It's his own thing. He owns it. And every time I hear a jazz guitar player guy use that pedal, it immediately sounds like him. And I just want to tell all those guys, take that shit out of your pedal board. It's over. Find something new.
Right.
Because it's like almost like, like, I don't know, like Eric Johnson on a fuzz face. You play that sound for 1 second, that's Eric, So I know it's hard to do because it's a really cool sound and it kind of gives you a vibe, but unless you want to really sound like Kurt, you gotta not do it. And I've seen a bunch of people do it in New York, and I'm not the guy to tell them no. But that's my opinion about it. Is it's over. He owns that shit. Move on.
Move on. Yeah. That's fun. I feel like Pat Metheny had a similar thing in like the '80s too, but it wasn't a Pog. It was some kind of like synth sound. I don't know do you know what it was?
He had that synth guitar thing, but he also had that stereo chorus,
Right.
on his guitar. It's like once those guys do it, it's great and everything, but you have to find your own shit because unless you really want to sound like him,
Yeah, it's great for like it's like a tribute for a second or something. Like if you're doing a solo and want to almost like give him a nod or something like that. Sure, but if you use it every solo and you're just trying to pass it off, like get out of here.
Yeah, because it's. I remember Eric Johnson's a friend of mine, and sometimes we play together. And one of the times he was playing in New York a bunch of years ago, I sat in with him, and he goes, "Yeah, just play my guitar and plug it to my Marshall." And every note I played sounded like him.
Yeah.
like every note, you can't get away from that sound. And I remember going like, "Oh shit, what am I gonna?" So it's kind of that thing where it's great, but he owns it. Move to another area, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Speaking of Eric Johnson, have you heard that record that him and Mike Stern did together a while back?
Yeah.
Oh my God, so fucking good. Again, I don't come from that world, so I only discovered it like 4 or 5 years ago. And when I heard that song "Wishing Well," there's like a live version that Mike Stern does with Richard Bona on bass at one of the jazz festivals. Oh my God, man, fucking blew my mind. It's such a beautiful melody.
Actually, me and Mike is a good friend. We're actually playing this Thursday together, the Bitter End.
Oh, really?
Mike,
that's
Mike.
Awesome, man. Yeah.
It's fun.
When I was in New York back in February, I saw the Bitter End pop up because I was looking for places to go to, and I just didn't get a chance to make it there. I found a bunch of other great places. I just didn't get it. But next time I'm there, I'm going to go and check it out. It sounds like there's a lot of cool shit happening. Are you familiar with New Blue also?
Yeah, New Blue is cool.
Yeah,
New Blue is. There's not a lot of places anymore. A lot of places in New York closed. There is still places, but it's not as much as there used to be,
Yeah, and that's what I've heard, for sure. All right, let me do my unpopular opinion this week. Let's see what we got. I don't really have any music-related ones, so I hate the subtitles when people put subtitles on, and you don't. And like, if you speak English and you're not deaf, why do we have subtitles on when we're watching movies, especially if we're watching like comedies where it takes the punchline out of everything? Like you're trying, like, I get that you want to, like, some people are better readers than they are listeners, and I get that. But I mean, bro, talk about killing anticipation for anything that you're watching. I don't know. I hate it.
Yeah, I would say as a foreigner that English is my second language. Some movies, not all movies, but some movies, it helps because you can kind of sometimes don't quite understand what they're saying,
Totally, and I get that 100%. Like my family is from South America and from Cuba, and we have to often make those adjustments, and that's totally fine. But when I'm like with my friends and stuff that don't, where there's none of those precursors, and one person wants the subtitles on, I'm like, bro, it's also distracting because like I end up reading them and not watching the movie, so I'm just like, I'm missing shit, you know what I mean?
Just read slower.
Read slower.
Read slower. Don't give away your own punchline. Well, my thing is I stand in front of a guitar amp too much to hear everything. So like,
the rest of us here don't stand in front of guitar amps or anything.
I'm just saying, it's nice to be like, what did he say? Oh, I get it now. It makes sense.
Yeah, I feel
so I'm a subtitle guy.
You're a subtitle guy. All right. And Oz, how do you? So for you, it helps. But how do you feel about it in general? If you don't need them, do you like having them there?
No.
No, you're not into it either. Okay, I'm not alone on this one.
All right, fine.
Bro, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to pick your brain. I love talking to all you guys at this level. It's always inspiring for me. And so I just appreciate, again, the time and everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Have a good rest of the week. And I look forward to everything you got going on, man.
Cool, man. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.